A narcissist doesn't fear you because you hurt them. They fear you because you've slipped out of their control. They're not angry simply because you left. They're furious because you didn't look back, didn't apologize, and didn't need them to define who you are. And in their carefully constructed world, that's a devastating blow. Unlike healthy people, narcissists don't build their identity from within. They build it from the reactions of others. Every compliment, every glance of admiration, every tear you once shed, those were all bricks in the fragile wall of their ego. So when you go silent, when you stop reacting, stop begging, stop even hating, you become something they can't control. And that is when their entire illusion begins to crumble. On the surface, it may look like they've moved on. They smile, post pictures, maybe even flaunt someone new. But behind that mask is desperation. Because when a narcissist loses their main source of reflection, which was you, they don't just lose a relationship, they lose the distorted sense of self. They've depended on their whole life. Think about it. You were the one who gave them chance after chance. You forgave. You stayed. You tried to fix wounds you didn't create. But over time, you realized the longer you stayed, the more you disappeared. The more you gave, the more they took. And in the end, you did the one thing they never thought you would do. You left quietly, without a dramatic ending, without a final confrontation. That silence sent them into panic. Because for a narcissist, the greatest fear isn't that the relationship ended, it's the loss of control. And you, the one they believed would always return, became the first to show them a brutal truth: they no longer had power over you. They'll never admit it, they'll never say out loud that you were different, but deep inside, they can't forget you. Not because of love, but because you were the only one who ever reflected back who they truly were, even the parts they tried to bury. And now, with you gone, that reflection is gone too. They've become invisible even to themselves. This video will take you deep into those hidden psychological layers, the collapse that happens after you walk away. Not to make you feel smug, but to help you see clearly you were never weak. Leaving was not a failure. It was an act of power, a wake-up call, and the beginning of freedom from a manipulative system that has lasted far too long. So if you've ever asked yourself, do they think about me? Do they suffer? Why does my silence enrage them so much? The answers are here, and you deserve to know them. On Stoicism Breath, we explore what truly happens when you step out of the narcissist's control and why your freedom enrages them more than anything else. Stay with us until the end of this video, because the truth you'll discover here won't just help you heal. It will give you the strength to stay firm on the path you so bravely chose, the path of freedom, authentic identity, and no longer needing anyone else to define your worth. A narcissist doesn't hate you because you once loved them. They don't even hate you for walking away. What cuts deepest is that you saw through them and you had the courage to turn your back without needing to explain, without needing to justify a single thing. That quiet strength shattered their illusion of control, the belief that they could manipulate emotions at will. To a narcissist, love is never about genuine connection. It's a tool for power. As long as you stayed, they had a script to play, hurt you, then rescue you just to reaffirm dominance. But when you walked away in silence, without demanding an apology, without chasing closure, without playing their game, it wasn't just an ending, it was a reversal of power. And in their distorted world, that is unforgivable. The hatred they carry isn't heartbreak, it's ego injury. They hate you because you said no to control, because you stopped being their mirror, no longer reflecting back the image they worked so hard to maintain. And most of all, because you no longer needed them something they've never been able to accept from anyone. So they rewrite the story. They may tell the world that you're the problem, that you're weak, overly sensitive, or immature. But that's just ego defense. It's not about you. It's about protecting themselves from the brutal truth they lost someone who once loved them deeply, but who refused to be used any longer. Remember this, narcissists don't grieve like normal people. They don't sit in quiet reflection or face regret. They feel the rage of a wounded ego, the tearing away of a false self-image. And the one who caused it is you, the person they once believed they could control, now turned into the greatest threat to their distorted belief system. That's why even after you've left, they keep watching. They act indifferent, but behind the scenes, they scramble to control the narrative, retelling stories to make you look like the villain. But all of this comes not from strength, but from fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear that others will see them the way you did, stripped of the mask. And in that moment, their hatred for you becomes something else, a mirror reflecting their deepest insecurity. They are not invincible. They never were. You did something they could never prepare for. You took your power back. You refused to play their emotional games. You didn't collapse. Instead, you grew stronger, calmer, braver. Their hatred is not proof that you were wrong. It's proof that you were right. You've become the one thing they fear, envy, and can never control again. Because in truth, a narcissist doesn't exist as solidly as they pretend. Without control, without your reflection, their entire illusion starts to fall apart. On Stoicism Breath, we uncover one of the deepest truths about why a narcissist unravels when you walk away. A narcissist has no stable sense of self. They don't build identity through inner growth or genuine self-worth. Instead, they survive through reflection. They need people to mirror back the image they want the world to see: important, desirable, superior. And when that mirror was you, the one who gave them genuine attention, emotional presence, and authentic care, you became their most valuable reflection, not because they loved you in a true way, but because you were the most sophisticated tool they had to feel like they even existed. And when you walked away, not with a fight, not with an explanation, but with calm, resolute silence, you didn't just leave. You took the most precious mirror they ever had. For them, that's worse than a breakup, because what they really fear isn't the loss of love. It's the loss of being seen. Without your gaze, without your admiration, your reactions, even your anger, they're left in chaos, unanchored, not knowing who they are anymore. In desperation, they may rush into a new relationship, shower someone else with flattery, play the role of the perfect partner, but it isn't love, it's survival. They're scrambling to prove they still have worth, that they're still wanted. But here's what they didn't expect. You can't be replaced. The new person may be more compliant, easier to please, less likely to question. Yet no one can reflect them as deeply as you once did. No one else stayed after seeing behind the mask. And so the comparisons begin quiet but haunting. They remember your eyes when you saw through their lies. They remember your silence that cut deeper than words. They remember how you touched the fragile human beneath their facade, the part they've always tried to hide. And that unsettles them, because every time they look at someone new and don't see the reflection they crave, they realize the mirror is broken. No matter how hard they try to piece together the old illusion, it doesn't work. And that's when they begin to spiral. A narcissist doesn't know how to define themselves without someone else's reaction. Without your reflection, they start to feel invisible. Your presence once proved to them they mattered, that they were worth attention. But now you're gone, not just physically, but emotionally. You don't reply, you don't post heartbreak, you don't chase, you do nothing. And that silence isn't emptiness, it's a declaration. It forces them to face their deepest fear, a world where they are no longer the center. That's why they spiral into compulsive behavior, checking your social media, asking mutual friends, sending vague signals. They're not really looking for you. They're chasing the feeling of existing, the feeling your attention once gave them. Because without you, they're like a blurred image, unacknowledged, unreflected, fading into the void of who they really are. On Stoicism Breath, we uncover the moment when the narcissist's collapse begins not with noise, but in silence. A narcissist can't feel real unless someone is looking at them and affirming that they matter. And when that reflection disappears, the collapse starts from within. It's not just sadness, it's an ego crisis they can't name because they have never learned how to exist without someone else acting as their mirror. Without you, they're forced to face themselves. But when they look inside, there's nothing to see, just a void, dark, cold, impossible to fill. This is when the mask begins to crack. The calm, composed image they show the world hides a silent implosion. Unlike the outbursts, demands, or manipulations you once endured, this phase is different. Every tool they relied on, silent treatment, sulking guilt, playing the victim, suddenly fails. Because you've stopped watching, you've stopped reacting, you've stepped off the stage, and the harsh reality hits. They no longer control anyone, not even themselves. Their psyche was never built on true self-awareness. They never learned to regulate emotions or face emptiness with maturity. And now, with no spotlight shining on them, the stage goes dark. They may still smile in public post, cheerful updates go about their day, but look closer. The eyes droop, the face strains, as if clinging desperately to something slipping away. Their behavior grows erratic. Sometimes they fall into silence. Other times they become overwhelmingly loud. Both extremes reveal the same truth: they've lost their direction. No matter what role they try to play, the victor, the abandoned, the reborn, it all fails because there is no audience left to reflect them. You've withdrawn, and the only one left to face them is themselves. And that is their greatest fear. This leads to a dangerous kind of silent depression. No one sees it because a narcissist never reveals weakness. Yet alone in the quiet moments, they wrestle with a terrifying question: who am I when there's no one left to manipulate? The answer never comes. A lifetime spent building masks has left them hollow. There's no one left to text, no one to threaten, no one to attack and then apologize to. Every effort to manipulate is like reaching into thin air, touching nothing. And this pain isn't like the sorrow of losing love. It's the agony of losing control, the unraveling of a false self, collapsing piece by piece with no one left to keep it alive. On Stoicism Breath, we explore what happens when silence turns permanent and the narcissist realizes the game is truly over. For a narcissist, it's not love they grieve, it's the reflection you once provided. You weren't just a partner, you were the mirror that confirmed they mattered. But when your silence stops being a tactic and becomes genuine release, they're left with nothing to press, no door left to re-enter. And that's when the collapse begins. No loud explosion, no dramatic scene, just a person sitting in the ruins of every scheme that once gave them a sense of control, now worthless because no one is willing to play along. At this crossroads, they face two paths: one of truth and painful inner confrontation, or one of retreat back into the same toxic cycle cloaked in a new mask. For most, the second path feels safer. From a young age, they learn to escape pain through manipulation and performance, not by naming their true emotions. So instead of healing, they reconstruct the mask, this time more sophisticated, more subtle, and more dangerous. And their rebuilding always follows the same script: finding a new supply, a new admirer, a new believer, someone who hasn't yet seen behind the facade. They'll shower them with sweet words, promises, gifts, playing the role of the perfect partner. But here's the truth. They already know. Deep down, no one can replace you. Not because you were flawless, but because you were real. You were the one who saw them clearly even when they didn't want to be seen. That feeling both terrified them and made them crave you. This time, though, the performance is shorter, more rushed, more hollow. They no longer have the strength or patience to sustain the illusion. Over time, their relationships grow shorter, emptier, more chaotic. The more they fail, the more desperate they become, trying harder to use others to fill a void they don't even understand. Only a very few may hit rock bottom and finally whisper to themselves, "What have I done? Who am I without all these masks?" That flicker of humility could be the beginning of transformation, but most will never allow themselves to go there. Instead, they polish their old masks, appearing successful, spiritual, enlightened, or even a healer, but inside they remain hollow puppets, moving through life without a soul. Each repetition of this script robs them of yet another chance to heal. And here's something you must remember: if you tried to help, if you gave until you had nothing left, if you hoped they would change, none of that was your failure. It was their limitation. No one can be saved if they refuse to step into the light. No one can see the truth if they insist on hiding in the dark, protecting a shattered ego. You, the one who dared to walk away, became living proof that a person can choose truth and from truth be reborn. Here lies the deepest irony. The more you heal, the more they unravel. The calmer you become, the more insecure they feel. The more authentically you live, the more exposed they are, stripped bare by the falsehood they once hid behind. A narcissist doesn't fear losing you because of love. They fear losing you because you were the last mirror reflecting their existence. And when your healing begins to shine, when you stop mentioning them, stop checking in silently, stop writing vague emotional words meant for their eyes, that's when they feel the loss most sharply. Because at that moment, you've stepped completely out of their sphere of influence. Healing isn't about silence anymore. Healing is when silence isn't needed, because your strength now comes from within. This is the turning point. You no longer see them as a wound to be tended, but as a lesson that has ended. And that truth flips their entire mental power structure upside down. They thought one message, one look, one breadcrumb would always be enough to pull you back. But now you don't react. You don't seek closure. You don't play their game. And nothing terrifies them more, because your peace has become their greatest loss. When you post a glowing photo, not to prove anything, but simply because you feel joy, the narcissist feels threatened. When you laugh, not to show you've moved on, but because you truly have, they realize something devastating. They are disappearing from the screen of your mind, and that more than hatred is what they cannot survive. On Stoicism Breath, let's talk about the moment that terrifies a narcissist more than hatred itself: your invisibility. You didn't just leave physically, you left energetically. You stopped playing the role they assigned you. You stopped fighting. You stopped needing them to define you. And with that quiet decision, you took away their anchor, the very thing that made them feel like they had an identity. While you are learning to love yourself, setting new boundaries, and building healthier, more authentic relationships, they're left battling a void they cannot fill. They may smile in public, post happy photos, or appear successful on the surface, but beneath it all lies envy, regret, and a crumbling sense of self, because you're no longer their supply. Worse than that, you've become a living testament to growth, to strength, to freedom. Every step you take forward, every act of self-ownership is a reminder to them that they are losing in a game they once thought they could never lose. And here's what they will never admit: you didn't leave because you were weak. You left because you were strong. You didn't stop loving them. You finally loved yourself more. And that's something they will never fully understand, because real love is not control, it's freedom. When you heal, you no longer need to look back. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain. It's your calm, not your anger, that becomes the final blow to their illusion of power, because you're no longer a character in their script. You've left the stage and chosen to live your truth instead. And that more than anything is the ending they can never control. They always believed they could write the storyline, direct the scenes, and wait for you to crawl back in tears, apologies, or guilt. But when you stop seeking closure from them and instead create closure within yourself, the entire game collapses. You didn't just end a relationship, you ended the cycle. Your silence isn't manipulation, it's liberation. You don't need their apology, their validation, or their recognition. True freedom isn't loud. It doesn't need grand declarations. It's found in the quiet details, the way you sleep peacefully, the way you speak to yourself with kindness, the way you wake up lighter, no longer haunted by their chaos. And that's something a narcissist will never understand. Because to them, every ending must be dramatic revenge victory or a desperate plea. But you chose none of that. You simply stepped away calmly, without theatrics, without accusation. And that is what they can never get closure from. A narcissist doesn't crave truth, they crave emotional control. But by walking away and healing from within, you denied them the one thing they wanted most, proof that they still lived in your mind. True freedom isn't about making others understand you. It's about understanding yourself. Not everyone is strong enough to walk away without needing justice. Not everyone is brave enough to let go without demanding closure. But if you are still walking, still healing, still building peace in your own life, then you've already done it. You don't need their admission of guilt. You don't need their collapse to feel victorious. Your victory is the peace you nurture every single day, the peace they will never reach. And if there's one truth worth holding close, it's this: real maturity comes when you no longer need a beautiful ending to a terrible story. You just need yourself, your scars, your lessons, your rebirth. No explanation required. No validation necessary. No audience at all. Because you've written a new chapter without them. And that's something a narcissist will never be able to do. Live a life that's real without needing someone else to reflect it.